everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back another test disc courtesy of Arrow Video, and I am really appreciating and really enjoying doing these test discs. And the videos going forward from this point onwards will be variation of test discs and some standard reviews, all Asian based content, which is very exciting, and happy to do some collaborations with some fantastic people behind some big labels. And I'm really appreciating given the chance to explore these films before official release and to dive into these films possibly for the very first time, check out their special features, especially out the transfers, and to report back to you guys what you're going to get on the edition. I'm very honored to check out these films and to kind of dive into them and see what you guys think alongside it ahead of release. And for today's video, we're doing part 1 of 2 for Free and Free Extreme, which is coming out 20th of October 2025, so a little ahead of time. Get into that kind of spooky season now. Halloween's around the corner. October, it soon will be here, and there is some fantastic additions and releases coming out in October. Quite too much from various kind of places, from Third Window to Arrow to Radiance. So many great, interesting kind of titles coming out. Some for the very first time on proper physical media, on Blu-ray, high definition. And Free is something I really want to check out for quite some time. I think it was on an old DVD. I think maybe just the second one actually, for Extremes. I'm not too sure if both of them were available on DVD, but I knew they were around. I saw the imagery, and part of the production company, which is Peter Chang's production company, which dives into the extra side, which I'll get into soon, which he basically, basically run a production company and basically spearhead some of these anthology films alongside the Trilogy and some of the other kind of really creepy kind of J-horror, supernatural foreign movies, not just Japanese titles, but also some Hong Kong stuff in there, trying to kind of put its foot through the door. Very interesting films. I've only seen the first one so far. Second one will be coming up soon, part 2, in terms of my just first time reactions and impressions. And this is the interesting thing about these ones, because this is an anthology. This is a 3 stories basically within each film. So the edition itself features both of these films, well, essentially all 6 short films, alongside brand new special features with a booklet and really cool artwork. I'll put some imagery up here in terms of the really awesome artwork, which I think is really impressive, which gives you a little tease about what kind of stories you're going to get for each one. So definitely kudos to the artists who did that, and some great packaging and a pretty reasonable price as well in terms of that release. Film itself, the actual 3 anthology shorts, I'll be breaking down each one of the directors involved, alongside the special features, which I'll do a separate little section there. If you're not too bothered about my thoughts on the actual film itself and you just want to know about the special features and just going to see what they're about, I will put a timeline in the description so you can skip ahead if you don't want to know my opinions on the actual film itself. Now, before I dive into the actual 3 shorts themselves and my thoughts and impressions on them, I want to provide a little bit of context to what this actual film is. 3 different directors. This is an anthology kind of series of shorts, different lengths, all leading up to about 2 hours and about 10 minutes or so, give or take. These are more creepy ghost story movies. These are more kind of dread movies in a sense. These are more character focused ones, spookier, more J-horror kind of angle, less than kind of terrifying kind of experiences compared to something like maybe like the VHS movies, which are a lot more kind of extreme practical effects heavy, a lot more kind of bigger budget, I would say, definitely compared to something like back in 2002, where like the VHS ones are just going for kind of blood and gore and gags and just kind of very experimental, and but have access to a lot more kind of resources and technology in terms of, the editing and special effects, and just doing things more than you probably could have done maybe back in the early 2000s, where this kind of concept of an anthology thing was relatively still fresh and they're still kind of figuring it out. Keep in mind, there was a lot of anthology movies way before Tales of the Crypt. There's quite a few kind of series of kind of things, on TV or movie format. So as being said there, if you've not watched these films and you're curious to see what these films are, and you're thinking this is going to be some kind of extreme kind of horror, kind of dread-filled, kind of nasty films, these are more ghost, kind of cautionary tale films, more spooky, more kind of, spirits and kind of curses and things like that, and borderline experimentation. But all 3 films, well, all 3 shorts focused on characters in terms of cause and effect, and that's the kind of the rhythm, the theme of all three. Not jumping ahead too much in terms of special features, there's a really fantastic extra through Peter Chang, who directs the third entry in the first film, and he ended up directing last minute down to the director dropping out. He's spearheaded this idea essentially in his production company, and he essentially says, we wanted to create 3 different kind of shorts from 3 different directors from different places in terms of Korea, Thai and Hong Kong, and basically just allow all 3 directors essentially free reign to do what they want. They would read each other's scripts, but they wouldn't have any kind of wraparound or sort of, tie-in essentially. They're all 3 very distinct, very different types of little shorts put together one movie. They do have a somewhat of a theme in terms of this kind of, like I said, haunting kind of ghost story tale kind of, idea. They, one doesn't go extreme body horror or anything. They're very kind of similar in the sense of the tone and the atmosphere, but 3 very different types of shorts. Without further ado, let's dive into the 3 shorts on 3.
말씀 좀 해보세요.
뭘?
무슨 일이 있었나?
그 차에 얼굴이 심하게 읽은 아무래도 안 좋은 생각이 들어.
Okay, so first entry is directed by Kim Ji-woo, the infamous Korean director Kim Ji-woo, which is fantastic. Big fan of him. As you can see from the previous editions, I do have some by Arrow, which I've done a few already, Radiance, I think Studio Canal, and obviously there's a previous 2 Arrow editions as well from the director. Thankfully, a lot more of his films are getting good physical releases, or, starting to creep out there. Umbrella's done A Quiet Family as well, so definitely one of my favorite Korean directors, and I've been a big fan of his work since getting into foreign cinema way before doing this channel. In terms of getting into French New Wave is my kind of entry point, and then going into Korean cinema, and obviously eventually finding kind of Hong Kong and then Japanese cinema. So definitely Korea has definitely been the most impact in terms of my foreign kind of experience, not just within horror, but also within action films and various other kind of fantastic kind of directors in that space. So it is great to see something that I haven't seen of his added on to the kind of the filmography kind of, tick box as they were with Memories, which is the first entry on this 3-part short. Clocks in about 39 minutes if I remember correctly, and it's pretty goddamn good. It's a really good haunting kind of J-horror inspired kind of film. It's a bit of a kind of a puzzle kind of mystery. It's a kind of a murder mystery kind of thing. There is something strange going on. There is a series of kind of hallucinations and dreams, and our main character is basically hallucinating or seeing his wife, who's just gone missing in the film. And you get a series of very stylized, striking kind of imagery, very kind of haunting with its kind of audio and sound cues, definitely having a lot of open spaces within the kind of the garage and this kind of apartment complex, and just a very lot of attention detail to sound. And that's something like Japanese, Hong Kong and Korea do so well in terms of the horror side of it, in terms of just audio, just creating a sense of kind of atmosphere and dread, and you definitely feel that very much from the offset. And it has a really fantastic kind of introduction to that very creepy kind of opening leading into the kind of the title, which I love that kind of transition. And you're trying to figure out what's going on, what's happened, where is this wife, what's going on in terms of this imagery we were seeing back and forth. And I don't want to give away too much ultimately what happens, but it definitely gets interesting, gets very weird at the same time. Definitely nothing mind-blowing in terms of a revelation. You probably could figure it out pretty quickly. However, it's just really well done, really well handled, subtle performances and some pretty shocking imagery that does happen. Definitely playing with editing and playing with kind of audio as mentioned, and very dreamlike within its kind of settings. And I like the kind of a lot of the empty kind of locations. There's a really like welcome to this this town, this kind of new build kind of city, and that's interesting as well because there's not many people around, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. It's kind of a dual kind of story between what's happened to her and what's going on with him essentially, and he's had this mental block. There's a daughter involved in it, and it's just trying to find out what happened, and it turns into this kind of dread horror murder mystery type kind of video, and it's very well handled. Definitely a kind of a precursor, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of Tales of the Two Sisters, which I believe came out a little later, if I'm not mistaken. This was 2003, so this was actually a year after 3, which makes a lot of sense because I think definitely this was a little experiment essentially to kind of lead into something like this, which has the exact same type of kind of concept and tone and dread and atmosphere. Memories I thought was a really good highlight. I definitely think it's a really strong kind of entry to lead into this 3-parter, and yeah, I'll leave it at that, but definitely worth checking out for sure. The second short on this film is called The Wheel, which I can't pronounce the director's name. I will put his full name in the kind of description here in terms of the title. He's a Taiwanese director, if I'm not mistaken, all about culture, greed, desire, and about curses. Very traditional kind of, folk tale, and this idea of the puppets basically being curseful and basically driving people insane, showing visions and showing kind of premonitions and things like that, and just really getting inside this really local kind of village and basically destroying it from the inside out, rotting it from the inside out. And it's a pretty interesting concept. It definitely is very experimental, very 2000s within its kind of concept, where like the first one very much felt like the Korean director, very much felt his style and a precursor to something like Tales of the Two Sisters. This one is very 2000s with its slow-mo, with its kind of blending of kind of transitions. However, not terrible, actually pretty good, pretty fun, pretty like of its time. Definitely feels refreshing in terms of its kind of execution compared to something like the more modern horror, where like all the Blumhouse stuff feels like the same package, fucking kind of cardboard cutout. At least with these kind of early 2000s ones, yes, they're a little dated, yes, they're a bit wonky a little bit, maybe in terms of the visual effects or some of the kind of the imagery, but it's at least fun. It's at least kind of like a bit different. It's not over relying on one thing or it's trying to be the same type of kind of cutout film. It's doing something a little different. Does it work completely? No, it doesn't. Is it experimental? Is it fun? Yes, it is. Now, I've got to say, I'm not familiar with the director's work. I've not seen any of his previous films, and I don't think he does many films even nowadays. I think he did a handful of movies from the 2000s beforehand, and does those very specific kind of cultural Taiwanese type films. I don't think he's done horror since then as well. I could be mistaken. Just looking at his filmography, they all seem to be dramas or character pieces, which, funny enough, this is definitely a character piece. The through line, as mentioned in my intro, is all 3 of these shorts are based around characters, and you get the kind of the sense of this kind of horror tale, dread, ghost story aspects to all 3 shorts, because they're about the circumstances that these characters put themselves in or find themselves as these kind of shorts go on. And this one is about curses, about these kind of puppets, which is driving one of the villagers completely insane. I think he was a wealthy person, someone who had access to all these puppets and was the kind of the, I want to say leader or maybe influencer or however you want to kind of call it, but he was the guy in charge essentially. And you've got someone else, which I believe his son, who wants to take over, and he basically is wanting that wealth, wanting that position, and you get some pretty wild stuff that does happen as the film goes along. Without going into spoilers too much, I definitely think this is the weakest of the 3, which I think everyone kind of agrees with and kind of universally kind of acknowledges is I think it's a pretty good one. I think it's a decent kind of short, definitely works as a middle kind of, entry within all 3 kind of shorts. I think it's got some pretty cool ideas, and I like the kind of the cultural kind of expression here, and diving into some sort of, you know, something primal. Definitely really appreciate where the short goes, and definitely takes a couple of risks. In terms of the overall execution, in terms of the overall idea, I definitely enjoyed my time with it, and definitely would revisit again as part of all three. Wouldn't be one I would skip. So while I don't think it's as good as number 1 or number 3, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. And last but not least, we have the third and final entry called Going Home, directed by Peter Chang, which also did the excellent Dragon, which is the Donnie Yen kind of murder mystery, you know, bit of one-armed swordsman kind of, you know, tale. Very, very awesome and just super impressive in terms of that film. It's the only one that I've seen of his filmography. I know he does more dramas, he does more kind of, you know, character pieces. However, Dragon is definitely a character piece, much like this one. And it's an interesting kind of, you know, concluding kind of chapter. It's Hong Kong cinema. You're gonna get a lot of familiar faces, a lot of familiar actors are in this one, which is great. And definitely great to kind of have this a part of the kind of collection. Peter Chang, as mentioned in the extras, is the producer and I believe the production company behind these anthology films, and he definitely spearheaded this and was doing something quite different for the time in terms of pushing new ideas, doing a lot of horror movies, you know, producing them, being behind the scenes and doing quite well internationally, and just kind of pushing these kind of ones forward. And this is a really cool idea he kind of put together, and basically took the directing duties last minute and made some changes within the script and kind of, you know, brushed off the ending, because apparently the original director, which I don't know who it was really struggling with the conclusion of this. And obviously Peter Chang stepped in and did his bit, doing a character piece, love story, tragic love story, of course, within a kind of a haunting kind of setting, as a kind of a dark horror-based kind of atmosphere. And I think this is definitely the best one of all three in terms of the shorts here. Now, the reason why I think it's the best one of all three is because I think Peter Chang did an absolutely fantastic job of putting this together. He is known for doing dramas, character pieces, love stories. This is a tragic love story. And I think this one is the most fleshed out in terms of its concept. I think it's the best structured in terms of its pacing. I think the pacing is excellent in this. I think it's a decent length as well. I think it's the longest of all three, if I'm not mistaken, about the 40-minute marker. I think it's better edited, has a fantastic score. Production value is through the roof. You know, they dive more into this in the extras, of course, but the location they've used is so perfect for the story and the setting of this kind of tragic kind of story. And it's fantastic. You definitely get your money's worth in terms of the location, and kind of adding in various kind of pieces and items here and there. This kind of really strange kind of massive apartment complex in Hong Kong, and you've got these kind of really big open square kind of, you know, rooms, and they're all kind of very blocky, and it's, you know, very kind of industrial and horrible colors, and it just looks fantastic. It looks very kind of dread-filled in terms of its atmosphere, and I imagine there's some color grading that went into it as well, and some deliberate choices to make it a certain look and a certain style. And being the fact that we're spending a lot of time in this location in terms of the hallways, and one main room that we do see, which has a kind of like a built-in sort of shower, kind of like, you know, tiling on the floor. It's really interesting kind of, you know, way it's kind of structured, and the choices in terms of cinematography, editing, how it's filmed, put together. I think it just really is excellent. And from that, you get a really rich, really engaging kind of, you know, a mystery and a really cool concept, which really is played really well. It's very kind of haunting, it's very beautiful, it's sad, it's creepy, it's engaging, and it's just great performance. Very minuscule. Also, funny enough, Peter Chang, this was actually his second or third, I think, feature film. He hadn't done many kind of directed-based movies. He's more of a producer, more behind the scenes in terms of some of the cinematography and the action side. A lot of other kind of collaborators. Very rich kind of history he's had, which dives more into special features. But I wasn't too sure about who this director was, and I was familiar with in terms of Dragon, but I didn't know his impact within Hong Kong cinema and his kind of more business sense kind of thing, you know, going again, producing, filming, starring in some films like Hero Shed No Tears with John Woo, behind some of the Jackie Chan films. So that's been my thoughts and impressions on Free in terms of a whole package. I think all three shorts are really interesting, really unique, hold together by an interesting premise of spirits, curses, and kind of a dark, tragic love story, I guess. All well handled with its own individual ideas from its directors and its own budgets. And I think it's a really fun 2-hour kind of a horror anthology. Keeping with our expectations, don't expect a full-blown kind of, you know, bloodfest like the VHS films. These are more J-horror based, more, you know, haunting, ghost story, cautionary tales of. What are your thoughts on the film? Please comment down below. And let's dive into the special features. Back with the special features for free on the first disc. And funny enough, though, all the special features actually are all kind of from Peter Chang. And it's interesting how I'm noticing a lot of the archival stuff versus the new stuff. There is extras from the original release back in 2002, 2003. Him talking about the project, being the producer and the director of the third entry. There's extras from 2005, and there's extras from 2025 talking about his experience and a time and a place. So basically 20 years worth of type of interviews from different points in his life and his career, all variations of the same type of material. They just say, even in the new extras, back what he said back in 2002, just perspective and time has gone past. And I do think they're good extras. I do think there is a little bit of rinse and repeat at times, but again, there are archival extras that are there to kind of add a little bit more insight into what was going on at the time and his production company with kind of producing these films. And I think the newer extras, cross-pollination, if I'm saying correctly, part 1 and part 2 is on the other disc, is the most up-to-date version, 2025, reflecting on these films in terms of a kind of producer's hat, the ambition to try and kind of, you know, bring in other directors, basically being very honest and transparent, saying he never really wanted to do horror his entire career, but, you know, if the opportunity's there, if it makes money, try and be ambitious with, you know, having different directors from different countries and just creating a really fun project. And the fact he did 2 of those films and unfortunately couldn't do more is a bit of a shame, but there is a little bit of a hint that there could be some, you know, leeway for that maybe in the future. But there's a brand new 15-minute extra with director Kim Ji-woong, who did Memories, the first entry of the you know, Free movie. Funny enough, he's got a poster of Cobweb, I believe, on the background, so it must have been during that time he was making that film. But his is very good in terms of the insight of him making Memories and him saying coming off doing comedies with that serious, a bit more kind of, you know, standard kind of horror, leading into something like A Tale of Two Sisters, which I was right on the money in terms of, you know, in terms of the creative process, doing something like that, leading into something like A Tale of Two Sisters later on, with some of the same collaborations and the same people involved in it, in terms of the scorist and the cinematographer, coming back to do Tale of Two Sisters. So that was a really good, informative extra, and just talks about his whole experience making that, bringing some actors in and what his intentions was, and just trying to transition into some kind of different type of genre, even though he did a little bit of that kind of satirical kind of dark comedy with his previous films. He wanted to kind of try something different, and Memories served as a kind of an in between that. Alongside that, you got a brand new filmed interview with Peter Chang talking about his short in terms of going home and how the director kind of dropped out last minute and having to take on directing duties, changing the script around and kind of casting, and basically just talking about his experience making something like that, being the fact he doesn't usually do those types of things. He doesn't do horror that often. He very much said, you know, he doesn't do shorts, really doesn't have many ideas for short films, and being, again, very honest, very transparent about his capabilities, his desire as a kind of a director, star, producer, and, you know, how he kind of basically seize the moment essentially to do something quite unique and quite interesting. And I think he really enjoyed the process making that short, and just talks about his experience with the script and the cast. One thing definitely worth mentioning is that both Free and Free Extreme are brand new 2K restorations from Arrow Video. So this is definitely a massive step up from those old DVDs, which I imagine would be quite dated. Even though there's a lot of grain, there is a lot of, you know, different ways how these were filmed. They definitely look a lot better from the kind of DVD low quality footage that I have seen kind of go around on YouTube, and while still maintaining the kind of the atmosphere and the dread and the grain and the look of those early 2000s shorts. So that's been my thoughts and impressions on Free in terms of the special features. You know what I think of the films in terms of the individual shorts. What are your thoughts and impressions, guys? Please come down below. What do you think of Free Extreme? Is it the better entry of the two? I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions. So in time, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.